With that said, I'd like to announce our first speaker of the day. It's Brian Garrison. Brian works for Select Sires in Ohio. He graduated from Ohio State University. He didn't put the year down here. I don't know why he didn't mention that, but Ohio State is the home of the Buckeyes, for those that don't know, and a very strong football program. I think they were undefeated this year, or maybe just one loss, undefeated. And but they weren't qualified for any bowl games this year due to a suspension. I don't think Brian had anything to do with the suspension, but they have quite a football team. Brian's a well-known judge throughout the world. Actually, he's judged 9 national shows. He's judged World Dairy Expo many times. In '97, he did the Holsteins, and we were talking today, and he made the Bull Crest Silver Cow brand that year. He's done the junior show there, the Brown Swiss show as well, the Milking Shorthorns, the Red and Whites as well, and he's judged in Australia, Japan, Germany, England, Switzerland, France, Japan, Korea, Mexico, and Brazil. So he's well versed. I've showed in front of him before, and he always gives you a good look when you're in the ring as well. So that's always a good thing. Also, Brian is, if you spend some time with him, he's a Brown Swiss lover, and he and his brother have Brown Swiss under the Scarborough prefix, and they've showed at World Dairy Expo many times, and they have quite a successful operation with that. Brian's been sire analyst for Select Sires for quite a few years now. He's been in the AI industry for 27 years, and 26 of them he's been a sire analyst. I don't know what he did the other year. He didn't mention that. But with that said, I'd like to welcome Brian Garrison.
I'm going to take this out, and I tend to be a little bit of a walker when I talk. And, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about, I think, this marketing, your Holstein genetics. It has become a very fast-paced world. This doesn't look very fast, but it is pretty confusing. And I think that's a little bit maybe what all of us are facing. And as looking at the panel today, I'm maybe the representative more from the AI standpoint of it. And I'm going to just try to share with you a little bit of the thought process that we went through at Select Sires and in this changing world. I have done this for a number of years. The first year when I started out, Lauren, actually I sold semen. And I tell a lot of people that's the best thing that I could have done. And in some ways, maybe I wish I would have done that for 10 or 12 years, just because it really taught me to learn to listen to folks like you on what you want, rather than me pulling in the barnyard and me trying to cram down your throat what I think you ought to buy. And as I go through this presentation, hopefully you'll get a sense that that really is still part of our philosophy of trying to develop the right kind of bulls for you. This team of guys that we've got right here represent about 160 years of experience of breeding cows, buying bulls, really kind of a passion for the business. Charlie Will, who heads up our sire selection, is responsible for bringing in some of the breed's greatest bulls, some of those bulls that you saw in that Impact Sire picture that sold in the fun auction the other night. He's the guy that brought in many of those, including Black Star and Elton and Emery, the likes of those bulls. So he leads our team, but this is a group of guys that is very, very passionate about it. And don't lose sight of the fact of what has made Select Sires successful. And we always want to keep forefront in our discussions with you folks as breeders what has made you successful. And I think in this era of genomics, that's an important thing. If there's no other take-home message you'll hear me mention 2 or 3 times throughout this presentation is don't forget about what you've done the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years breeding cows. Just use the new tools right along with that. You know, it's fun to look at great cows. It's fun to look at things from different viewpoints, different angles. And today, and during the winter months, you know, some of you maybe have the perception that Julian and I, Julian sits in his office and I do mine right behind our computer in these cold days, but I tell you, there are a lot of days where we have some windshield time to think. But when it gets really cold outside, there are lots of part of our AI business that really make successful bulls. It's not just me picking those bulls. Once we pick them up, the people that take care of those bulls, we've got people that research how to make our semen better, how to help your fertility. There's lots of parts of our business that are very, very important. But when it gets really cold outside, one of the things that moves right up the priority list at Select Sires is we want to take care of your biggest, or our biggest assets. Okay, we have had some cold days this winter, but it's pretty important. Lauren is such a team player that he sent his hat down for us to put right over Atwood's equipment. That works out pretty well. Those impact sires that I talked about, I think it's important to recognize that there's different kinds of bulls that can be impact bulls. And in this genomic era, I think that's one of the things that has allowed us to maybe focus in on that. You know, we tend to all talk about how, you know, what is an animal's LPI, or what is her TPI, or what is her, here in Canada, I still hear a lot about DGV. You know, I think looking at the detail to identify bulls that will do different things, a bull like O-Man, he was really kind of ahead of his time for health and fitness traits. At that time in the U.S., we hadn't even heard of a 3% calving ease bull. But those things in today's world are very, very important. Health and fitness or calving ease are things that do sell a lot of semen. We bred for those kind of bulls for a number of time. I think we've come to the state or the point now where we're looking for some milk bulls, some more milk volume bulls. Planet came along in a time where, I mean, he was a milk volume bull. I tend to hear from people all across wherever I've been, I'd like to have maybe a bit more moderate size frame cow. He did that. He was a different pedigree, so he came along at an opportune time. And then there's a bull like Damien that's maybe as good a tight bull as Select Sires has had in a long, long time. A bull that was bred with a specific thought in mind. He was a line-bred Della. So, I mean, just an example of some things that we can do and probably do a bit more accurately with the use of genomics. In today's world, everybody wants to talk about how, you know, these young bulls. You know, as I'm out contracting cows, everybody wants to know who's the next young bull that we've got. So this ranking of how high of, you know, on GTPI, and you know, the numbers that I'm going to show throughout the presentation, they are on a TPI basis. You know, we have our sampling program here in Canada, our PGAC program, to where we'll sample about 25 bulls, and we'll try to find bulls that rank well on TPI and LPI. TPI, I would offer to you, is probably our primary selection criteria and tends to be maybe the most widely accepted globally in today's world. But this program, between our PGAC program and our PGA program in the States, we'll sample about 300 bulls this coming year, 25 of those here in Canada. But I point out that progeny test program just because it is still the gold standard. You know, these young bulls, it's great. You know, we do know a lot more about them than we used to, but our goal is still to have that high reliability bull when he gets to that 97%. We feel real fortunate to have, you know, a lot of those bulls, including some of the bulls that rank right at the top end of that list. And as I said, it takes a team of people. Fortunately, 5 of those top 8 bulls are bulls that still have semen available. You know, local, more hitting closer to home here, if you look at bulls that sired very good 2-year-olds throughout 2012 here in Canada, when you can have bulls like Sanchez and Alexander that have added second crop daughters and rank right towards the top end of that list for siring very good young cows, the kind of cows that you'd like to go to the barn in the morning and milk, and then your newer bulls like Atwood that are moving right on up on that list. You know, I think in someday, you know, very well could be very close to the top of that list. We're fortunate to have 9 of those bulls, top 25 bulls, and I think that is a direct result of our sampling program, on both sides of the border. But bottom line, as I mentioned, it is a customer-driven sire development program. That's kind of what we're after. Our breeding goal is to create a 7H bull for lots of different desires, because throughout the room here today, there are lots of different priorities. There's different breeding goals that folks have. You know, I think we all like the good type, whether you like to show them or just whether you like to have a nice barn full of cows to go see. If you'd rather get into the seed stock, selling the embryos, sending bulls to stud, those kinds of things, that's a whole different thing. As I said, we hear a lot more feedback from our sire committees that our member co-ops send to give us input on these high producing and more feed efficient kind of cows, more moderate frame cows, so that's something we have to think about. Red and polled are kind of 2 buzzwords, I would say, at least in our experience here recently. Polled maybe is a bit more of interest to us than the red. And then we've got people that have different management philosophies. We're getting more grazers all the time. You'll see a lot of this stuff in our promotion. You know, and we don't come up with these different logos like Health Mark and Diamond Selection, Showcase Selections, Feed Pro. That's, you know, it's not a marketing. It's an effort to try to identify bulls, because each one of those logos represents a different selection index, a different emphasis on different traits that try to fit those different breeding goals. In this fast-paced world, I'm not sure many of us would have thought, well, last month in January, I went to our Holstein Association USA's website to see which bulls had the most registered offspring. Bull that had the most registered offspring in the U.S. for the month of January is a bull called Mogul. He's a young bull. You'll see those bulls that are starred, and actually I forgot the star gold chip here at the bottom, but there's a number of those bulls in the top 12 that are all young bulls. 5 years ago, I'm not sure many of us would have thought that young sires would have as many registered daughters in the National Herd Book as that. But that, to me, that is a sign that genomics is a very powerful breeding tool. I think people have become more comfortable with it. I will say that even myself, it's a learning process for me every day. You know, things are changing. It does add power to the prediction, but I would offer to you, don't forget some of those traditional tools that we've always used. The pedigree, the performance of the individual cows, the progeny that a cow family can have. Those are all still real important tools, things that we'll continue to look at. The only thing we've done is we've just added the genomic portion of those prediction to our toolbox, along with all those other tools that we've always used. Those numbers continue to change slightly. When you test a female or you test bulls and you get a different result 3 months after you got the original result, part of the reason is the predictor group does continue to change. Each official sire summary, they'll recalibrate things and they'll use those additional proven bulls to help improve the accuracy of that predictor group. And you'll see here in Holstein's December of 2012, almost 20,000 animals in that predictor group. So that does help the accuracy, and that's part of the reason that your numbers change over a period of time. This is kind of an interesting slide that we got new numbers just about 3 weeks ago from our USDA. And this daughter equivalence. So if you genomic test a bull, one of your young bulls, that portion, the genomics part of his prediction, what would that be the equivalent to if he had milking daughters? So when you genomically test a bull, that would be about the same as him having about 32 milking daughters if you look at his milk proof, or his milk prediction, I should say. For final score, or for type or confirmation, it'd be about 33 daughters. But you'll see here the health and the fitness traits. That is where we learn a whole lot more genomically on these young bulls. The information that we used to know the least about, and it took the longest to find out the real story, that's where we can learn the most. But to me, that really kind of puts it into perspective. If I would have came to many of you 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago and said, I'd like you to breed 80% of your cows to a bull that's got 32 daughters, you would have looked at me like I got 3 eyeballs and went to the milk house to find a pistol. So I think this really does put it in perspective. I don't mean to come across that I'm anti-genomics, because I'm not. We're very pro-genomics, as you'll see as I move through this presentation. But I do think it's good to keep it all relative. And that all equates to reliabilities for the production traits of about 75%. And remember what I said earlier on, our goal is those bulls that you're still really happy that you use when they get to be 97% on reliability. Is genomics working? I do think it is. If we looked at bulls that were progeny tested in 2008, and we compared their April 2010 genomic predictions, and we chose the April 2010 predictions because that is the sire summary when USDA did make some very significant changes to their calculations. You know, I think it really helped in terms, some refer to it as the shuttle effect, but that is when that change was made. And to us, that is probably the most accurate time to make a comparison to when they get actual progeny proofs. And you'll see here that 52 of the bulls that actually went back into active service as proven bulls, at the time that they were predicted genomically, they ranked in the top 25%. And you'll see that very few of those bulls ranked in the bottom end. Many times those bulls at the low end that ranked in the bottom per quartile, those are red bulls or maybe bulls that are very, very extreme for tight or something like that, more of a niche market. The bottom line is, this genomics, it has helped us to sort out between these brothers. I first saw this slide, I sent it to my brother. I've got a brother that's 7 years older than I am. And for the longest time growing up, I was always Brad's little brother. He's a veterinarian. And about the time this genomics thing came out, and it did get to the point where, as Lauren said, I've been fortunate enough to get to a couple county fairs and judge and whatnot. People got to know me a little bit more. And he got to be getting Brian's big brother. Well, I sent this slide to him one day, and I said, Brad, I said, do you know the difference between God and the veterinarian? He said, what are you talking about, Brian? I said, God doesn't think he's a vet. But the bottom line is, when it comes to this genomics, and this is a little bit, I've said it a few times, but I tell you, it is the take-home message. Keep things in balance. Don't forget the things that you've always done. It's very, very important to use all the tools that you've got, use a little common sense and a little cow sense and breeding philosophies, and stick to your guns on your goals is very, very important. But this genomic thing, it has changed how we're doing business. I tell you, a lot of people think that it's a lot less work for Julian and I today. I would offer to you that it's that much more work. Because in our case, that team of guys that I showed you the picture of early on, we still have to do all the things that we used to do. We got all kinds of reports. We've got Excel files on computers. We've got reports printed out. We still got to go look at the cows. We still like to look at the cow families. We still like to look at the environments that they come from. But yet we've got to pull the hair. We've got to get those hair samples submitted. We have to deal with calves that maybe aren't sired by who we thought they were out of. We've got to deal with calves that aren't out of the cows that we thought they were out of. Lots of things, lots of additional work that goes into it, but it really has changed the landscape of our business. How are we looking to the future, or where we're going to source our bulls? We're going to screen many, many calves across North America. We're going to genomic test a lot. Just traditionally, like we've sourced bulls, but we're going to screen many, many calves across North America. We have purchased and will continue to purchase some embryos in North America and from Europe. We've tried to build alliances and some relationships with breeders, some herds that will have some exclusivity on genomically testing their males and have access to their elite females all across North America. And then the ART program, where Select Sires actually has ownership of some females, is another source that we've looked to for the future. And that's part, one of the things that Lauren asked me to speak primarily about today was Select Sires and our ownership of some females and how that affects us moving forward. We did, as a co-op, I'd say Select Sires was traditionally and maybe stereotyped as a co-op that maybe weren't the very earliest of adopters, but would get on the bandwagon after researching something pretty thoroughly. Genomics was something that we took that approach, and I think you'll see the progression here of the number of animals that we genomically tested starting in 2010, a little over 3,700. But this last year, 2012, we'd have genomically tested closer to 7,400 animals. And somewhere between 3,500, I haven't got the final number, somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 of those were Holstein bulls. So if you think about us genomically testing, say 3,500 Holstein bulls, and as I said, we're going to sample 275 in the US and 25 here in Canada, that is a pretty highly selected group to come up with 300 bulls out of 3,500 tested. So these are the kind of the percentages that we've set out to target. Our traditional methods of testing bulls right across North America, we would guess that, or our goal would be that about 30 or 40% of those bulls would come from those traditional sources. You see stock breeders out there. Our embryo program hopefully will equate to about 10% of our bulls coming in. Those herds that we've got a very good relationship, a longer term kind of a relationship would hopefully provide about 20% of our bulls. And then our ART program, not more than 30% of our bulls coming into the program each year. That's a lot of testing. When you're approaching 7,500 animals tested, that isn't all that we sirenless do. We don't just pull hair every day. But it was a very defining time for Select Sires to determine how we were going to go about balancing this technology out with our procurement, working with you seed stock producers out there on bringing bulls in. How do we build those relationships? How do we build confidence in you having bulls live at Select Sires? And one of the things that our board of directors wanted or encouraged us to look at was this ownership of females. You know, it's a group of guys, and we have our co-op structures. We have a sire committee that each of our member co-ops sends a member to give us input on breeding strategies. You know, this is our program of ownership of females, was something that was talked about a lot. Aggressive reproductive technology, that's where the acronym came from. You know, and it gets to the point of genomics was something that was kind of new. IVF was something that was kind of on the forefront at that stage of the game back in 2009, was really starting to get geared up, which helps us to, in terms of genetic principles, turn that generation interval a whole lot quicker. So our board approved the ART program, or us starting to purchase embryos and females back in June of 2009. And part of the thought process was so we could have some females that we could make some creative meetings. There are times when you know, we're out working with breeders, they're a little bit reluctant to maybe try some matings. I mean, some of it may be, but you think that I wouldn't know a good cow. She'd kick me right between the eyes, or we come up with some off-the-wall bull. But bottom line is, you know, we saw some things that we have, you know, again, listening to our customers, our members out there, some things that they thought breeding-wise that we needed to create some bulls that would do. So we purchased a limited number of females in those embryos at that time. Uniqueness of pedigrees, this line breeding or inbreeding issue is something that we started to see could be a problem. And I would offer that genomics is something that's maybe led us down that path even a little quicker than I expected or that I wanted to. Because I'll admit, I was one of the ones when we first started talking about genomics, I thought maybe it would allow us to identify some different lines, some different blood out there. And maybe for me, it's maybe done just exactly the opposite. So that's something that we wanted to focus on. We saw it as an opportunity to provide research on optimum calf care. You know, bringing the calves that Select Sires owned out of our females to a facility to put them on an accelerated growth program. Could that allow us to get semen out of bulls quicker? Could it allow us to get more semen out of young bulls? We wanted to use all the genomic tools that are available to us. They continue to improve and change the testing panels that we have genomically. You know, any of the new tools that may become available, we wanted to be able to use those. And if we own those females, you know, we can make that decision real quick. The ART note, and one of the other points that isn't on this slide is our board wanted to ensure that long term we could continue to provide some of the breed's best bulls for many of those breeding bulls at a very affordable price. You know, because at that time, you know, we were 2 or 3 years away from 2013, but we realized that you folks were going to have the opportunity to test your own bulls. You know, I guess we set out, our mindset from the get-go was to try to build those relationships and be fair with folks right from the get-go, but we wanted to ensure that we could have an affordable product. So when it comes time, you could buy some of the very highest ranking bulls at an affordable price. These ART donors live at Transova IVF facility. Many of those are out in Iowa. They've also got a facility in Maryland, but many of ours are in Iowa at this point. So those females, many of those young females would go there to do IVF. They are put in Transova recipients. They have a very large herd of recipient beef animals that are all health tested. That was something that was pretty first and foremost in our, I guess, our putting this program together. But as far as a health protocol and those recipients, that was something that fit into exactly what we wanted to do. Those calves are actually born at their facility and raised there. And then at our facility in Plain City, Ohio, we built our calf campus where those young calves would arrive at Select Sires at about 45 to 60 days of age. Those calves have got a great start. They do a very, very nice job at Transova, but they arrive there in these calf barns. We try to make those large enough to accommodate the number of females that we set out to have that 30% come into our program. You know, I'm not real scientific, I'm just a bull brusher, but this slide will show you, if you look at scroll circumference on those bulls, the blue line is bulls that select sires, out of select sires female that come from Transova. You'll see the scroll circumference is just that much more improved over the bulls with this red line that come from the traditional methods. As far as how early those bulls will make semen, again, the blue line is bulls that are put on collection that come from select sires, females that come from, or males that come from Transova. The red line, those that are brought in from other herds that we've procured those from. So we've been able to get some good evidence that, you know, the care of those young bulls is really, really important to be able to get semen out of them quicker and to be able to get more semen out of them quicker. But I would offer to you also that in today's world, those young bulls, they're not equipped to do it like the old guys are. You know, and that's part of, you know, the supply and demand on some of these young bulls. Some days you maybe get frustrated that you can't get such and such a high-ranking bull. You maybe can't get him quite as early as you wanted. Some days we beat our head against the wall too, because the highest one, he won't make semen for the first 2 or 3 months, or he doesn't make near enough to supply. But that's just the reality of it. But we've had good success on the feeding protocol and care protocol of those young bulls coming in. So once we do IVF on those females, we get some of those calves on the ground. What do we do with those cows after we get them pregnant? Where are they going to calve in? We set out to find some cooperator ARC herds. Currently we have 5 of those in Michigan, Indiana, New York, 2 in Ohio. These are all larger, very well managed commercial herds. Each one of these operations would be larger freestall operations that do a great job. These are folks that do have an interest in genetics. They've always used good bulls and do have an interest in good breeding and where the co-op's genetics go in the future. So these are where these females ultimately go to calve in. There are also herds where once we genomically test some of the females that maybe don't quite cut the criteria for us to take to the next generation to do IVF on, these herds would actually purchase some of those females back from us to put back in their herd as well. The value of the ARC program, fully maximize the generation interval. You know, those calves that we choose to keep or stay right at Transova, those females that are some of the highest ranking ones, they would never leave there until, you know, they're as a virgin heifer, until they're of age to where we can start to do in vitro fertilization on them and try to use some of those unique matings on some of those young bulls that we've got that are very, very high ranking on as early as we can of getting semen on them. We want to create those unique matings that aren't typically found, to find something different. I'm going to show you a few examples of that. We want to develop some line matings to fulfill future mating needs. See, we've got lots and lots of large herds out there, some of them that don't have a great, or some in cases any identification program. And they are concerned about this inbreeding thing. And so we want to be able to have some animals that they can come up with a program to where it's easy for them to try to avoid that inbreeding. Create matings that fulfill Feed Pro needs. Feed Pro is one of those selection indexes that we've done quite a bit of research on to find feed efficient cows. These are cows that probably, as you compare it to a TPI index, it's an index that probably has more emphasis on milk and less emphasis on stature, or is really be the biggest difference on Feed Pro compared to our TPI. We still want to create some high TPI sires that will compete nationally and internationally. Create other high rank sires to stretch the six sires image rather than just being a TPI stud. And I would say that, you know, that maybe the stereotype of select sires has been a TPI kind of focused group of bulls. Maybe bulls are maybe just a little bit more balanced, but we want to try to expand that to address many of those other breeding goals that I talked about early on in the program. And I already talked about providing high-ranking bulls economically for you folks, our customers out there, was one of the goals. But creating something different for the future, that's something that we're all about, and trying to do that economically. And this strategic part of the ARC program is something that's pretty key. And to me, that's kind of the cool thing, and really puts the You know, for several years I had presentations talking about the art and science of breeding cows. The art of breeding cows is where a lot of you folks come in, because I've seen, you know, many of these faces in the room have bred a lot of good cows over the years. And the way you did that, I mean, you had a goal, you had a thought process in mind. And if I breed this cow to this bull, I can get this from her, or I can get this from this bull, and it'll match. You know, this is what we can do, and do some different things with females that we own and make those decisions to do them. For example, this cow here is a first crop, or a daughter of one of our very popular high genomic bulls, a bull called Shot Owl. We had Shot Owl and Shot Owl, and both ranked really, really high as young bulls. We used used him as a unproven bull for some embryos out of a high-ranking cow in Wisconsin. You'll see her pedigree. She's an owl out of an alley, out of an Orion, out of a charm, out of a Nick. Those are bulls that 99% of you in this room have never even heard of. But I tell you, in each one of those cases, they were bulls for their specific era, at high reliabilities, were high-ranking bulls, offered some good health traits, those kind of things. What we did is we bred her to bulls like Plato, a Potter son, Richmond, another Potter son, Arsenio, stuff that didn't have planet blood in it, stuff that didn't have omen in it, trying to find something, create some bulls that longer term we could use on a lot of this planet blood out there. So there was a strategy in mind. You know, some of these bulls aren't going to rank quite as high on TPI as some others, but if you look at in terms of outcross pedigrees and something that's different, do have some value. The same cow, you'll see here this alley cow that we use, Shot Owl. When she was a virgin heifer, we bred her to a bull called Planet Burton. We did IVF on her early on to Burton, who was a Planet son. The resulting calf was Santana 7500. Any of the animals that you see, males or females, that have that SSI prefix, those are animals that are a result of this ART program where Select Sires owns the females. When this Santana 7500 was a virgin heifer, what did we do? We did IVF on her to a bull called Sandy Valley Branson, who was the son of Observer. Those of you, well, I guess it's right here on the slide. You see what his sire is, Planet. That resulting calf over here, old 8312, he's just about got more Planet in than the Planet does. But we did produce a bull that was 800 net merit, a 5% calving age bull that's over 2300 GTPI. And bulls like that are what fit into a breeding program that we're going to call Selectogen here in Canada. In the US it's Stratogen. And this is where I'm talking about these larger commercial herds, and we've got several people that have got right into this even here in Canada, where we've identified 5 specific breeding lines in the Holstein breed, and we're going to try to line breed some of these animals so they're totally unrelated to those other 4 lines. So what you can do is you can use one of those line 1 bulls on line 3 for a couple years and just alternate those specific lines because they're unrelated to the rest of those bloodlines. So that, not to get into that a lot, but why worry about inbreeding? Because it can affect your reproductive performance. It can impact your pocketbook, is the bottom line. So this inbreeding thing is something that we've really kind of focused on. And the cool thing that I'm not sure a lot of people have really taken full advantage of, this genomic thing helps us to really better evaluate inbreeding, because not all brothers are going to be the same. You take these group of offspring, they're gold ones out of a pretty popular cow called Larcrest Cosmopolitan. You know, those bulls, when we look at it, when we made that mating, we kind of have an idea from traditional methods what the inbreeding level was. But this genomics, actually, by looking at the genomics, we can actually tell which genes that animal really did inherit from both Goldwyn and from Cosmopolitan. And you'll see here, there's one of those bulls that the expected future inbreeding is a whole lot less than what the other 3 brothers were. So we can utilize that information a whole lot more in making some of these matings, to create some of these line-bred bulls, and actually we can use that information in maybe making better corrective matings also on some females in the future. Where are we? 2012 results we had from the ART program, about 51 bulls that were born at average, about 664 on net merit, 21 right at 2200 for TPI. which would be pretty comparable with the 242 bulls that we had access to that averaged a little over 2,200 TPI. These are a group of bulls that we've got, our created bulls, that we will sample this coming year. You'll see those as high as 2578 on TPI, and all these bulls will be over 2350 by a variety of different, actually primarily young bulls throughout that group. Some early success: Mogul, the bull that had the most registered offspring, he is a result of us purchasing embryos from a cow, and we had them breed this cow to a young sire called Dorsey. He was an unproven bull at that point. He does have a proof now, and actually is one of the high-ranking proven bulls in the breed. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a Plain City zip code. I wish he did. But Mogul is a result of us purchasing embryos out of a young cow, and it's also a good example of using Mogul early on, because we've already got high Mogul sons that are on collection, early Mogul daughters. When you can have a daughter of Mogul that is 2481 on TPI, she's already got pregnancies that are going to be born this summer. Take that into account also, because this is a marketing workshop, and I tell you, we're all about marketing. And I tell you, I can, in an afternoon's time, I can open up sale catalog after sale catalog, and I can find more #1 daughters of the same bull than you can shake a stick at. We all know that we get information every month. We get official summaries 3 times a year. Take a look at the age of those animals. The other day I was talking to a guy, he had a calf come out, she was close to 2,600. He's got people calling, offering him lots of money for this calf. And he says, and I've got this opportunity that somebody wants to trade me some stuff. He says, now they're thinking about trading me a heifer that's due here in May, and she's 24, I think he told me like 2448. And she's going to calve in 1st of May. And he's got a 90-day-old calf that's, a little over 2,500, 2,550. For 100 points different on a heifer that's going to calve and one that's 90 days old, I told him that maybe he needs to do the math pretty quick. That's maybe not a bad idea. But you have to look at all the other factors, the families and all those things that I talked about earlier too. But I would encourage you to really study your lesson on that part and really factor in those ages of those animals, because how they calve in is still going to be important. Trying to find something that doesn't have Shadow, Planet, Goldwyn. At that time we created a bull called Lithium. He was out of a good Bolton cow, and so we actually purchased embryos sired by Domain. We used him early as a young bull, and now have Lithium sons that are over 2,600 for TPI. Here's another good example of using that high young bull called Shot Owl. We found a good cow up in Minnesota, bought embryos out of this young cow here. We bred her to Owl, and then that resulting calf, we used Robust. A bull called Robust was a high-ranking Socrates son out of an old man. Used him as a young bull to create this Miles bull. It was over 2,403 points on type and almost 1,800 pounds of milk that we are using as a sire father. So just another example of how quickly this thing can turn. This is actually the dam of Lithium, who turned out to be quite a good cow. She's 87 points that we've actually continued to work with even after she's calved in. There's some of those donors that certainly that's our goal, that maybe we could go back to them after they calve in. This is one of my favorites, a cow called Socrates Myra that has had many good ones. She's a really nice cow individually, but we've been able to use many different bulls on her early on from a good cow family again. Atwood was another bull that we used early on in the art program, and try to find some of those good young cows there. This is a young Dorsey daughter that we've used, and I think a good example of trying to still look at some of those things that we always have, because she was out of a Toy Story, Outside, Rudolph, a good cow family, something that was a little bit different. We bred her to Maurice, who was a Massey son out of a Bolivar. So we intentionally tried to keep it planet-free, and shadow-free. Those were some of the goals when we're making those kind of matings, but still use those same traditional tools that we always did to find a family that consistently will, genomically and to the eye, pass the test long term. The Shot Mindy cow has turned out to be one of the highest. She was always one of the high-ranking TPI cows of the breed, or after genomically tested TPI cows of the breed. She's a good example where, of our program, when we were purchasing females, we purchased a choice of flush. I forget what the other bull was, but they had one shottle pregnancy and it ended up being a female. Those calves were all genomically tested, and she was a late shottle. I mean, she was a late shottle, but she ended up being the highest one. That's what we chose to go with, and she's turned out to be one of the, probably the most consistent transmitting cow that we've had. She lives in one of those ART herds, and we continue to work with her today. An example of that is one of her daughters, a Shamrock daughter that's high ranking, has got an Uno calf that is our highest female now at over 2,700 for TPI, 1,004 on net merit. And here is a group of the females that we'll continue to work with at Transova of IVF. You'll see that calf at the top. They're sired by 17 different bulls right down that list, from 2,700 right down to 2,400. But those would be a group of heifers that we would focus in on for those next generations of females in our ART program. Those full sibs, Mena and Magic, that would go back to Shottle Mindy. You'll see there on the female side, 2513, 2464. Both Shamrocks, you'll see how many pregnancies we've already got by these. They're going to calve here in May, but we've got 32 pregnancies coming by a variety of bulls. Earnhardt P is a polled bull. So it's just an example of trying to incorporate something that's new that the market's telling us, that there's a need and a desire for out there. We've tried to incorporate some more proven bulls in that as well. With Snowman, Massey would be a couple examples of that. Here's another example where we used a polled bull on one of those heifers, one of the high-ranking heifers of the breed. So our ART program, I mean, we are trying to create, for your benefit long-term, bulls that will satisfy the kind of breeding goals that many people have. And hopefully you can see from a few of those examples that I gave you that it is a breeding program that there's a lot of thought that goes into. IVF has allowed us to do some different kinds of things with the same females. It's not an all-win thing, and it is an expensive proposition, which many of you know. But I do think genetically there is a lot of upside, and that's what our board of directors has really looked at. The upside certainly outweighs the investment. And we're confident that, if we can continue to bring our people in the labs, our people in the barns that take care of bulls, the guys like Lauren and Adam Hunt that are out here in the field providing you service day to day, if we can continue to bring those good genetics, our guys in the lab and barn will bring you a quality product from a fertility standpoint, because it is a true team effort. We in the sire team need to do our part. Right now it's as ever changing as I've ever seen it in my time doing it. But if we stick to many of those basics, and really if it comes down to building those relationships and applying some of these genetic tools that we have, I think we can have success, and hopefully that's what we're doing through our traditional methods and through our ART program, because your success is the passion of all of us at Select Sires. With that, I'd be happy, if you want to answer questions now or at the end, or if there's questions now, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Last week, Monsanto took a 95-year-old grain farmer to court because he was using patent seed. Now, after looking at this description of what you're doing and the immensity of it, you see or envision a situation where patents could take over all this and freeze out the seed people?
I guess I don't foresee that happening myself. I wouldn't perceive, that happening, to that degree. In our ART program, our board of directors, yeah, they felt strongly that it was something that we needed to do. But in terms of, us, replacing, totally replacing, working with many of you folks out there, that was never the intent or the goal. And that leading into your question, I guess I wouldn't foresee that it would get to the point where,
Well, let's say you developed a line or a family and, which are, you know, jumping up 300 points every test, and there's offspring within the nation, and it became one of your top producers. Could you patent that bull and freeze out the other offspring coming through?
well, I tell you, I'm not a smart enough guy to be able to tell you.
Do we have any other questions for Brian? Yes?
Are you still buying into female lines now and embryos, or are you just working with the ones you've got so far?
The question was, are we still purchasing females and embryos? And the answer would be yes to both. You know, we've, right now, I think, I showed you a list of, I think there were 35 females that were over 2,400 on GTPI. But we would selectively still look at other females to bring into the program, and would actively still look at purchasing embryos here in North America, in the US and Canada, and as well as Europe. You know, I'd say those purchases are going to be pretty focused, you know, to try to provide us that is something a little bit different, you know, from a bloodline standpoint. You know, we're a little bit of a victim of, as a breed, planet globally is going to have a big impact. In fact, if we look at many of the high-ranking bulls that I've got available to me to use as sire fathers today, they're either sired by a planet son or out of a planet dam. And that's it's a little concerning to us, but it's something that we want to focus on. You know, one of the things on our to-do list is try to continue to create some different lines, you know, and still try every effort to find some new maternal lines that will maybe allow us to do that, you know, whether it's embryos or females. And I would say that, you know, there again, you know, building relationships, there are some folks that I work with, they would just as soon sell embryos. You know, there are others that would prefer to make pregnancies. You know, so we've tried to position ourselves that, you know, we can dance with whoever's dancing, so to speak, but do want to be pretty selective in what we bring in.
The reason I asked is because when you first started it, obviously now with genomics and the prices you're hearing for these, you know, 3-month-old calves into the $300,000-400,000 range, is it still as cost effective as it was when you first kind of started?
Yeah, and I would be the first to say I feel that we're very fortunate that we got in when we did, because prices did escalate quite a lot. You know, and we haven't been in the position where we have invested at the high end as much as some of the others that have been very visible in those six-figure numbers, so to speak. And we've been pretty fortunate on some of the early ones that we did purchase. But I do think even at some of those high prices, you know, there's still a lot of ifs and some risk. You know, some of these animals will respond to IVF better than others, but some of those that will, I do think it still can be, if you factor in all the positives from a genetic standpoint moving forward. I think you need to use all the tools that you've got, not only just the genomic number. And I think that's maybe a little bit of a perception by the public that haven't been involved, and maybe try to throw stones at the industry, so to speak, because of some of these high prices and some of the other stuff that has happened. But you know, I would encourage any of you that maybe haven't gotten involved in the purchase of animals that kind of fit that mold, is to still look at all the things that you used to look at when you'd leaf through a sale catalog, or if you'd go visit a breeder. You know, ask all the same questions you used to. You know, about the cow family, about sisters, about brothers, how they flush, all those kinds of things. Those are things you still need to ask, along with the genomic information. You know, factor in the ages of these animals and compare apples to apples, not 90-day-old calves compared to heifers that are 3 or 4 months from calving. You know, do your homework as astute as you can. And some of those high prices, you know, it can certainly still can pay off.
Thank you, Brian, and maybe we want to have lunch when lunch is ready, so maybe we'll take more questions at the end of the day so we can move on to our next speaker.